it is. Y'all don't know anything about racing. This is true. You're right. You're in the wrong show.
Yeah.
You're watching the wrong show if you want to hear like super engineer stuff.
We are back. Welcome back to Hitting the Apex 2026. Evan, it's almost go time.
McLaren championship year follow up the 2 in a row, 3 in a row for constructors. Let's go.
I mean, we'll see. Based on testing, I'm a little pessimistic, but we'll see how they could be worse. Could be Austin Martin, but
Oh my God.
there is so much to get to. Obviously, new regulations this year. New team on the grid for the first time. Wow, when's the last time there was a new team on the
I guess
grid?
it
Oh
was
man,
Haas. It was Haas was the last one,
it
right?
was Haas. Yeah, wow. It's been a very stable sport the last decade or so. It used to be every year, a few new teams show up, a few teams leave. Um, been a while, but new team on the grid, new regs, new cars, man. It's an exciting time. It's a reset, so we'll see how it goes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, so we're going to start by you mentioned the new cars. Every year we get new cars to a certain degree. Obviously, this year with the radical change to the regulations, you're going to get very different cars, but we're also going to take a look at not just the cars, but the liveries. So, starting here with Ferrari. First thing that stands out to me is there's a lot of white on this car for a Ferrari. What are your thoughts on this car, Evan?
Well, so overall, I like the livery. I think that it's a decent looking car so far. For what they're decent looking car this year. I kind of like the fact that they're harking back to kind of the 1970s, the 312 Ferraris that were driven by the Niki Laudas and stuff like that back in the early 70s. They kind of had this similar white top of the car with the red surrounding it. So I think that's what they were going for with that. Ferrari is a really good team for us to start off with as well because they've had such a strong start to this preseason testing period. Their engines seem like they're the ones that are the class in the field as of right now. I mean, we don't know what everybody else is doing, but getting into the regulation changes as well. If you want to touch on some of that, Ferrari again is a good place to start with it.
Yeah, go
There's a
ahead.
lot. There's a lot of changes when it comes to the MGUK and the way that the the electric power is distributed now. It's more of a 50-50 split. So for those of our listeners and our subscribers that don't know, before it was more of like a 70-30 split when it came to the power from the engine compared to the power from electricity. Now it's more of a 50-50 split. So that's going to be something that's going to be big going into this regulation change. And Ferrari, as we're looking at them, seems to be doing a pretty decent job so far. Even so that they're blocking other teams from, doing little changes and asking for rule changes and stuff like that because they are kind of, doing such a great job. So overall, I think Ferrari, the livery looks great. How about you?
Yeah, no, it looks cool again. It's surprising to see that much white on it. It is a car that obviously is known for pretty much being all red. The other thing you'll notice and you'll see throughout these cars is the you mentioned some of the regulation changes. The engine, obviously, the wings look very different. They've made them simpler. We're going to get into those in more detail. We can certainly see that wing looks very different from what we've gotten used to in the current generations. Also, shout out to your dad hopping in the chat here. Good to be back. Good to be back. All right, let's move on to the next one. So the next one up on the list here is Red Bull. Um, I mean, this looks like a class. This is much more. The Ferrari went a little bit, more white than I would expect. This looks like a Red Bull. This is straight up the blue and the yellow and the red. Obviously, they have their own power unit now. sure when you start talking about testing. But what are your thoughts on just the look of this car?
Looks wise, I think they hit it out of the park. I think it definitely was smart for them to go back to a glossy look, as it says down at the bottom of the Red Bull with its glossy finish. For the past few years, I think a lot of these teams have gone for that matte, either matte black or matte white or matte whatever color it would be, because matte was kind of the in color. But for them to go back to this glossy color, it was really something that was a big change, and I applaud them for it. I think that this is a fantastic livery. It definitely has a similarities to what they've done for the past, what is it now, 15 years, 20 years that they've been going on. I guess 22 if this is RB22. They've always kind of had a similar livery, but this one does have that glossiness back to it, and I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it. It is very familiar, as you said. This is a cool angle too, because you can really see the side pot and that side design, how much that has changed as well from the top view. But yeah, I mean, you won't have trouble recognizing that. Yes, that is a Red Bull.
That's for
All
sure.
right, moving on. Ooh, new boys on the block here. The Cadillac, very muted. It's grays, it's blacks, it's whites. Thoughts?
I mean, I wish they would have gone for a little bit different look. I I'm not saying I don't like the livery. I think the livery looks cool. I think that they could have gone a little bit different. I think that they wanted to kind of distance themselves a little bit from the IMSA teams, because, for instance, the two Cadillac, the main two Cadillacs that they run in IMSA are blue and yellow. I think they could have gone with something similar to that here. It's got the same type of patterns and stuff. If you look right behind the Cadillac logo, that kind of digital print right in the back of it. Um,
Yeah.
with the IMSA teams and the 24-hour Le Mans teams that they have, the WEC teams, they have that color with that same pattern. Like I said, excuse me. Like I said, I think that they wanted to go a little bit different with this than go with that black and white monotone. I think it's cool. I think it's like I said, it just, I wish there was a little bit more color with it. Um, I like the flip flop pattern. Kind of harkens back to that old what was it, Williams or something like that. They used to do that
BAR did it heavily one year when they did half the car was the American half was the British half for British American racing, and it was that was pretty atrocious. Though I think this is done a little bit more tastefully.
for sure. How about you? What do you think overall of this look?
Yeah, I really like this. I think this might be my favorite livery this year. I like that it's monochromatic to a certain degree because again, there's nothing bright on here. I really like the white wheel rims. I think it's gonna pop on the black tires.
Yeah,
I think it is one thing I just noticed now is they took these photos with the hards on, so it doesn't clap. I think it might look like shit when they have the softs on. There's
the
like red
reds
wheels,
or the yellows.
but the one we're looking at here, I really like. It works well with the hards. Just gotta run the hards all the time to make the aesthetic work.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
with the
what they've
yellow
been doing.
mediums and the red softs, it might look a little bit different, but this I really like this look.
Yeah,
Good first effort from Cadillac.
definitely a good first effort. I mean, they've had long enough to think about it, right?
That's true. They did have years to get the paint, and then of course it's the best team on the grid.
Our
The
boys.
McLaren. I gotta say though, this looks like last year's car. It's so
I,
much.
yeah, I was gonna say 6.5. Let's do Olympic rating here. I'm going 6.5 out of 10. Come on,
Yeah,
they
this.
could have done so much better. I mean, I just think this was their opportunity. Being that they're coming right off the championship, that they're the team to beat. They're coming into this. Everybody's looking at them to show off and to show out and to all this stuff, and they come out with basically the same livery once again. And it's just like,
It
oh,
looks
come on.
exactly the same, and
Yeah,
then they've got. I mean, I'm all obviously like it's a. There's sponsors all over the car. The Google wheel rims. It's okay,
yeah,
maybe a little bit much, but the, this is. I mean, obviously, it design wise is different. It's a different rule set, but it looks very much paint job wise like last year's.
for sure. And
Yeah, but I'm disappointed in this. I gotta say, I wanted something different.
And I mean, maybe it's showing
Especially
something
coming
that
off the
they're putting in
championship, like
cash.
you said, you should do something and be like, we're the champions. And it's like, oh,
Yeah,
that's the
I
same car.
it would have been really interesting if they would have came out with the Vodafone Chrome, you know, the Vodafone Chrome look afterwards. That would have been kind of nice.
I mean, I don't think they can because, like, I think, man, it's kind of hard because a lot of that was,
Google
I
Chrome.
mean, they were like basically 50-50 with Mercedes at that point when Mercedes, one of the reasons for the livery change over the years, the Mercedes kind of became the team that, well, we'll look at this year's, but became
Yeah,
the team that took over that
that's true.
silver, and McLaren went a different route. By the way, I'm totally spacing on this. Did Norris pick up the one car? Is he going to be number
Yes, he
one?
did. Yes, he
Nice.
is.
All right, there we go. All right. Well,
As
that is the McLaren. Less said about that, the better. I think that might be my least favorite. Well, actually, no, it's not. Never mind. Take that back immediately. This Alpine is looks like last year's car, and you figure if any team needed a rebranded or refresh, it was this
you know, I'm not so bullish against it. Funny enough, their car looked great last year. The car looked fantastic last year. Standing still, on display, the car was gorgeous, but it wasn't that fast. This year, though, it doesn't look so good. But it might,
it looks
but
very similar.
but
And
it might
honestly,
surprise us this year on the road.
this was a Force India last year too. Like the same livery when PWT sponsored that. They used to be the pink car. Like
Yeah, but you know what?
I feel
I
like
used to
this thing
love those
needs
pink.
to.
I used to love those pink and white Force Indias. Those pink and
It
white
just
Force
feels
Indias
like
were
this
cool.
sponsor. I don't even still know what BWT is, but it feels like this sponsor has corrupted these cars long enough. I feel like they needed a rebrand. Although there might be someone behind them this year. I hate this car. I'm tired of looking at it. It's been this way for years. They stunk. I not necessarily. Now the Audi. Here's another new one. This is obviously the old Sauber or Alfa Romeo is what they were branded as. So Audi. Thoughts on this?
Best color scheme in Formula One right now by far. I think that the colors on this car are fantastic. I think this does everything that you think of when you think of Audi, industrial design. You know, what's the there's a famous guy Brom or something like that, or something that the guy worked for like the industrial design of like all these things that you see that he makes like lamps and anyways. I'm going off on a tangent. This is a beautiful color wise car, but the livery is just I mean, this isn't the best angle for what I'm talking about. If you look at this car sideways, there's a straight line that goes from the very top to the very bottom. On a curvy, sumptuous, rounded car, you got a straight line that goes from the top to the bottom, and it cuts the car in half. That I'm not the biggest fan of. They could have done so much better with this, with these colors, with the history that the Audis had, and Sauber has always been decent with making good liveries throughout the year. Let them choose it. But no, they went for like industrial design, blocky, literally, they got the black engine cover with the orange on the bottom, and then it just cuts in half, and the whole front of it's silver. I just thought it was, I'm not a fan of it at all.
Yeah, I will say from the color scheme standpoint, this is the old McLaren, right?
Exactly.
It's those colors, but yeah, it looks very
I think it's more red though than it is in this cut in this picture. If you look at
yeah,
some of the other
McLaren.
angles, it's more red.
Yeah, this looks a little bit orange.
Yeah.
I do have another. We can take a quick look and see if like this gives us a better view. I had another one open, but this one had better. Let's see if we can get there.
Yeah.
There's
See.
your line up the side. Know what you're talking about?
Yeah, so you see the whole front half of it's silver, but there's a vertical line right behind that air intake, and then the rest of it's black and red. It's very simple,
Yeah,
very very industrial designed, very you know to the point. But they could have done so much better. Even if they would have extended that red out into the side pods and maybe over a little bit into the to right underneath where the drivers like the torso is and the driver's pod there. If they would have brought that red up through and into there, and then blended it into the silver, or made some type of other way to transition into the silver, I think it would have looked fantastic. But the
Yeah,
fact that
you're right.
it slices it down the middle.
You're
It's just a
100% right. It looks so much better from this angle when you can't see that.
oh yeah.
Then you look at like this, like, what happened? You run out of paint?
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. It's like okay, the whole thing was silver, and you can even see the air ducts have a little bit of
Yeah.
the silver,
Yeah,
which
no, the front half of the car looks great and the back half looks terrible.
that's something I just actually noticed in both of these renderings. We're gonna have to pull up a picture of the R26 from testing, because they've actually completely changed the way that those side pods are. In testing, they've gone to that
Well, when they
Mercedes
release the
Benz.
concept cars and they never have the correct
No, for
kits.
sure. But going into the season, they're going for that zero pod that Mercedes tried and
Mm.
didn't work. Like those side pods that are opened up on there, they're actually
Yeah,
vertical now. They're just
interesting.
right up along the side of the car. It's interesting.
Yeah. There'll still be more tweaks before we get into the season. All right, Williams.
Livery wise, it's a Williams. I think they could have done something with the blue where the Barclays is, and maybe if that would have been yellow, like the old Williams blue and yellow, it would have been better. I've never been a big fan of the Duracell battery on the top. I don't know why. I think that's the most egregious product
It's
placement
tacky.
that there
That's why
is.
you're not. That's why you're not a fan of it. It's stupid.
Yeah, it just
It's
literally
dumb.
you got a Duracell battery sitting right on top, and that's coming from somebody whose son is completely obsessed with all products Procter and Gamble. He loves all that stuff. So he sees that and sees the battery, and it's like, oh my god, P&G. Oh my god, it's P&G. So I'm not a fan of that one though. I'm not a fan of this product placement here. I think that it's time to get away from that one.
It's also another one that you mentioned and we saw it, the Audi and how the back half just doesn't look like it fits with the rest of the car. This time, I think if you slice it horizontally across, you're seeing like the white and the light blue just not really go with the dark blue on the top half.
Yeah.
And we've actually seen them use different liveries that are elements of both on different cars. Or there's like they match together a few years of old cars together to come up with the scheme, and I'm not a fan of this.
Yeah.
Like even the thing is calling it a vibrant cobalt. That's only the top part.
Yeah.
The bottom half is white and sky blue. It doesn't all go together, but it's
For sure.
whatever the companies pay them. And Mercedes, I mentioned that they take over the silver, and then we'll see this year's cars because they've gone back to black here.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting that they went back that way. What are your thoughts on this guy?
I think that this one is definitely an improvement on some of the other ones that we've seen. I think that the way that they are blending in that turquoise in there, I think it's fantastic. The only part I really don't like is those little slash marks right above the Petronas. I think they could have
Is
done
that
without
is that must
those.
be a sponsor of some kind, right?
I think that's the AMG thing. If you look at AMG, like
Yeah.
after the G, there's usually like those little marks or something like that. If I'm not mistaken,
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure that's what that is. But this picture does give us a pretty good opportunity to talk about that front wing that we were talking about with the changes.
Yeah.
I think this is
Yeah.
this is an opportunity for us to talk about that a little.
Yeah, go for it. Did you freeze? Or did I freeze? Who freeze? Believe you are frozen. Well, we will hopefully get Evan back talking about the side pods here. It's an Adidas logo, Morgan's saying. Interesting. Tell your dad to fix his internet. Okay. It looks like it's 4 stripes that we can find another view of it actually. Let's let's go back and I think we can find it here while we hopefully wait for Evan to get back in here. It's the Cadillac, McLaren, Austin Martin. I have to go back up. Let's see if we can find that and see what that logo is. Hopefully we'll get Evan back in here in a second. There it is. A lot more gray showing on this. You still can't really see the what exactly that is, but they did sign. You're right. I think they did. I recall them signing in the DS sponsorship. Let's see if we can get Evan back in here. Looks like the logo. Okay, I see what you're saying. Oh, Adidas is on audio. I knew someone signing Adidas. Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Looks like the logo. Yeah, well, we can guess move on to more and get your thought on this one. Wait for your dad to rejoin. Next one we're looking at is Haas. Very I think your dad's getting back in here. Kind of there he is. Oops. Add. So we got spinning happening here. Are we gonna have a connection? I don't know. Was this amazing referring to the Haas? It's very white. It does look more American than the Cadillac does. That's for sure. This very much could throw this in IndyCar and it would fit. It's an interesting livery, that's for sure. Got been spinning here. Let me put them back in. Working on that connection. Yeah, I will say it's a lot of white. That's for sure. Red accents, some black, but yeah, majority white is an interesting look for Haas since they've been trending that way, but this is probably yeah. We looked at the caddy already, Morgan, but yeah, I mean, I think I think they really went for muted. Yeah, I think Cadillac really wanted to do more muted. If you look, it's really just two tone. It's shades of gray and black. I'm gonna go back to it actually. I think they wanted to keep it clean like that and monochromatic, because that's kind of what the aesthetic they're looking for here. Now, like I said, I think when they put some of the non-hard tires on, it's going to look a little weird. It's just going to break up that monochromatic look. But I like the way this looks, to be honest. So actually, I like this better than the Haas, to be honest. But when Evan reconnects, we can get his thoughts on some of this. He was just about to talk about the wings too on the Mercedes. So yeah, we're going to talk about the wings and the side pods. He is en route to try and rejoin. So well, it's easy when you don't have sponsors because you can mod whatever you want and not have to worry about the sponsors. So it is easier in that sense. All right, we're gonna try this again, and we got spinning it again. Let's see if it connects. I'm pessimistic. We're getting the same behavior here as before. Anyway, I'll always wait to see if we can get that worked out. We can look at the next car, which is the Racing Bulls. I guess the Visa, is it still a Visa, Cash App, whatever Racing Bulls? In any event, not really inspired there. Got Evan from his phone, which will work. It's gonna be harder for him to see his screen. You're back?
I'm back, but again, I'm doing it from my phone, just like you said. I don't know what's going on with my computer. It just started freaking out on itself.
Well, we talked about the Haas. I don't know if you know what they look like. I don't know if you can see the screen. I'm sure.
I can see it. I actually really like the Haas. Going or talking about that one. I think that might be one of the best looking cars of this year so far. Funny enough, I think that they've done a fantastic job just with the simple white and red livery that they have. I think it's simple. I think it's clean. I think it just looks good overall.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very clean. Morgan, by the way, is in the chat. I don't know if you saw it. So I've been having a conversation with him while he typed stuff in the chat to fill the time while you came in, while you got back in here. So he was a big fan of this as well. Yeah, it's. I feel like they've been trending that direction for more and more white on their cars. I think it just kind of reached its conclusion now.
Yeah, yeah, and especially with the Gazoo Racing logo on the back, I think that looks fantastic.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. Our friends at is it the still a Visa Cash App.com, whatever Racing Bulls are.
It is still V card.
57 sponsors in front of the name Racing Bulls, but I mean, to me, this is just last year's car repinned onto another year.
Agreed. I think so too. But funny enough, I think that it kind of looks good on this model of car. I think that the lines work very well for this car. The way that everything is split up again, kind of like Red Bull. I would give it a pass. I think it looks good overall. It could be better, but not bad.
I'm just not a big. I was never a fan of this livery, so this isn't gonna
Yeah.
isn't gonna do it for me. And then I think this might be the last one. The Aston Martin.
Could have done better. I think they had such an opportunity to do so much better. I think last year's car looked fantastic. I think that this year they had an opportunity to, again, you got the best designer car wise in Formula One, and you're kind of, you put basically the same exact paint scheme on as you had last year.
I mean, nobody kind of okay. So actually, first of all, Morgan says hi, and then talking about the Cash App was pull last year, but wants a new season. I would say that probably also applies to Aston Martin. It's pull last year, but wants a new season. But that said, those are Aston Martin colors. So like, there's only so much. Like that is not just for the F1 team. That is the traditional Aston Martin is that color. So I don't know how much they could have. I mean, they could have done something. Morgan's got some suggestions, adding more of the yellow.
More of that
I feel like they're almost. I feel like they're almost tied into having to do this green.
But I think that they could have gone more with the lime green, more with the like I said, that kind of the highlight color, to make it look a little bit, more, at least add a little bit more of that in there. It's just that one kind of little stripe that it's got throughout, and then covering the air intake as well. I just think that they could have done a little bit more with it, a little bit more. Maybe some on the wings, maybe some on the wheel covers a little bit. Just different places to where it would have been a little bit more highlighted instead of just so much just that one line.
Yeah, I can see that. I feel like the Aston Martin are going to get this color, and that's kind of it. All right, so we've looked at them all. What is your favorite of the bunch this year?
Funny enough, I'm going to go with Haas.
All right,
I think Haas looks fantastic. I think that they got those colors right. You have your three solid colors: the red, the white, and the black. And they went with it. It's very Toyota. It's very Gazoo Racing, but I think that's what they wanted to go for because that's kind of what they're leaning towards. I could see in the next year or two, that becoming that Toyota factory team that we all kind of hope that they're going to be. It's definitely what it seems like it's trending towards right now. So
Yeah, Morgan throws his hat in with Ferrari and gives Haas number 2. I'm
yeah.
gonna go Cadillac. I like the monochrome. I think it's interesting. I think it's unique. I think it's a good first introduction into F1 for them. All right, Evan, which one do you hate? Which is your least favorite?
I mean, if for nothing else, the fact that they could have changed it some. I hate to say it, but our boys.
The McLaren?
Yeah, I think that you had the opportunity. You're the two-time construction or constructors champion. You're the current drivers champion. You have another driver that could possibly be a champion this year in Oscar Piastri. You come out with the same same old stuff that you had last year. At least Red Bull went from a matte car to a gloss car. At least Audi tried something and is coming into this year, yeah, it may not be the best looking livery, but it's something new. It's something refreshing. But you're gonna come out as the champs and just do the same old thing over and over again. It's like, come on, you gotta do something at least a little different. Show out a
Yeah,
little.
I agree with everything you say. There's a missed opportunity here. Oh, but there's another car that stayed the same that was terrible last year, and that's this one.
Yeah,
So, as much as I'm gonna say McLaren should have done something a little bit different, capitalized on their championship, this piece of crap looking exactly the same as the one that was by far the worst car in the grid last year makes no sense to me.
yeah.
So I'll go with Alpine as my least favorite.
That is for sure.
All right, those are the new cars. Those are the liveries, but we've also got a lot of new rules. So a couple of big kind of changes to the first of all, just the design. The cars are narrower this year. They still have the same 18-inch tires, but they're also narrower. So generally going to have narrower cars, and the ride height's going to be higher. Remember the big radical change in the last car design with ground effects? They're now moving away from that, raising the ride height, trying to make those less impactful. So let's start with those. There's always some more impactful changes we're going to talk about, but out of those two, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the ride height change is definitely something that is very noticeable because you can see these cars now going back to a high rake design or low rake design. You can see the difference in them with the old regulate or with the previous regulations. Those cars were slammed to the floor. I mean, those things are basically rubbing on the ground the entire time, to the detriment of some of these teams because we saw Ferrari a couple of years ago or last year. We saw McLaren last year as well get in trouble for excessive plank wear. Now you're starting to see these cars hiked up in the rear a little bit. You're starting to see the difference, with the different ride angles, and I think it's great. I think that the way that you're able to do different things with these cars. I mean, we all know what ends up happening by the end of the regulation period, or in a few years. All these cars are going to look very similar because they're all going to see what works. They're all going to try to copy everybody's designs and stuff like that. But right now, you could take these cars for the majority of them, take the paint off of them, and we would still be able to tell which one is which because they look different. And I think that's something that is sorely needed in Formula One. Is that it's that difference in cars. We don't want a spec series. We want these cars to be different. And right now, you could take the paint off of three different cars, and I can tell you which one is which most of the time.
I think it's the case anytime there's new regs. Then when they figure out what works, they start copying each other. And by year 2 or 3, they all look the same again. Like that's what works. But to your point, yeah, the low ride height was such a big deal that, like you said, McLaren got disqualified for basically the scraping on the ground so much it rubbed enough out that they failed a compliance check after the race. That also, I forget who that happened to. So I think it happened to Ferrari earlier in the year too. So that's how close they were running to the ground. That's definitely not going to be an issue now. It's hard to remember this, but that last generation was the Porpoise generation.
Yep.
They started out like they were trying to get that ride height exactly right, and they're getting bouncy. So very, very big changes as that car evolved. We weren't really talking about porpoising by the end, but that was kind of the big thing at the beginning of the last cars. All right, so the next kind of big change is the wing flap. So, one thing talk about a lot in F1 is there's no movable elements. Well, there are now. So there are movable flaps, very similar to kind of what DRS was before, but it's on the front and in the rear wing, and can be used at any time by any driver anywhere on the track. So it's not an overtaking aid. It is straight up just how do we go smooth, faster in the corners and faster on the streets. So there's a corners mode and a straight mode on these cars. They can, when they're in the corners, they go into corners mode and the flaps close. They get more downforce. They get on the straights. They open those flaps up in straights mode and get less drag and can go faster. Now, given that this is all cars have this, they can all use it whenever they want. How do you think this is going to impact the driving?
Well, I mean, you're going to see these guys have to rely more on their battery usage and the way that they're implementing that. If you're able to use this at all times, these drivers are going to utilize whatever tools they can to be able to run as fast or the fastest laps that they possibly are able to do. So I think it's a good change. I think it's gonna be different doing these track previews now, not having to talk about DRS zones. When we're talking about these different racetracks, because that's something that we have been talking about so much for so long, is where these DRS zones are, how the passing is impacted by it. But I think it's a good change. I think it's definitely showing how modern Formula One is going to be for the foreseeable future, because I see more stuff like this coming in the future, not less. These cars are going to become more complicated and more dependent on movable surfaces and battery power and electronics. You already have drivers like Max Verstappen saying that this is basically Formula E 2.0 or something like that. He's saying this is more complicated version of Formula E with these cars because of how much electronics and electric power is utilized on these things. But it's definitely something that is going to be moving forward, just getting more complicated, more stuff like this is gonna come around. I like it. I think that it's gonna be interesting to hear the new verbiage. They're going in attack mode. There is what they're gonna be saying.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that
And
in a second. That's a different thing
so
than this. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. That is the new way to overtake. But yeah, these drive modes and corner and straight reminds me actually of the before DRS there was the F duct, where all drivers had it anytime they were on the straight they could activate, essentially stall the wing out using their hand or their foot or their leg. I mean, and press up against it to essentially push the airflow one way or the other. And that was kind of all the cars had it, and I feel like we'll see how they implement the flaps. There could be a wide variance how effective they are. We talked about this last year, even with Red Bull's DRS is better, even though they're all kind of should be theoretically the same. There's a lot more variability to get the front and the rear wing. You got to have it work in the corners and then open up in the straights effectively. So we could see some pretty very big variance between these cars at least this year until they figure out who's got the best one that everyone copies and steals it.
exactly. Even so far during testing, you see differences in design. You can see with the Alpines, their design on how their DRS is working is completely different than everybody else. Everybody else, has kind of that same letterbox, rear wing flap that we've seen from most of the cars for the past couple of years with DRS, where the top element opens up like that, and it opens basically like a slot in the middle of the actual wing. With the Alpine, it's going from here down flat. So you're looking at more of a wing that's held up like this to a flat wing with two open sides and an open top. That's something completely different, and they seem to be making it work as well. we'll see how it works out coming out of testing, whether they change it or not. But so far it's shown that it has some potential doing it in that way. And that's like what I was saying. We want to see these different ways of thinking, these different styles of cars. You look at the front wings and you can see the same thing. Some of them have these wings that have the on the outside of the vertical part of the front wing. There's some of them that have an extra horizontal winglet. Some of them don't. Some of them have smaller ones. Some of them have bigger. Like there's differences in these cars that we're seeing that are incredible.
Yeah, and yeah, as Morgan said, there's 3 ways the flap can open that they've seen so far.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's on brand for Alpine. Have it open the worst possible way. I also think you're over testing that we've seen so far, and then we'll see what shows up to Australia because these teams tend to sandbag a little bit, and
Oh yeah.
also depending on how they felt their testing went, might be copying. You might see them show, hey, that looks exactly like what Mercedes was running in the last test, and now it's on a Ferrari. What happened? They just copied it. But yeah, so those are interesting changes. I think the most you referenced this earlier, the most kind of impactful one is the overtake mode. So basically, the way this works is there is a detector. It's some elements of DRS. There's a detection line. If you're within 1 second of the car in front of you, again, same like DRS at the detection line, you then get attack mode for the lap. For the full lap, it's all it is. It's an energy boost.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with IndyCar, it's like the push to pass, except for IndyCar, you have for the whole race, and you kind of got concerned it's a fuel thing. This is not like that. It's for 1 lap. Now you can deploy it all at the front of the lap, at the middle of the lap, at the end of the lap. You basically have a certain amount of boost you can use throughout the lap. So it is a lot more driver discretion. There's not a zone that it automatically opens in, and then you drive it in that zone, and everyone kind of knows to target that. It's an entire lap of energy boost. So how you deploy it is up to the driver. So it makes it a lot more interesting because it's not just, okay, we got to get to the end of the straight. The overtake's going to happen at the straight. No, you could use it in the corners, for example, maybe to get close enough to overtake on the next straight. There's all sorts of things they can do here. It's a pretty big difference. There's still an overtaking aid, but the way it was implemented is very different.
And again, hopefully this is all works in conjunction with the new aero regulations, with the new engine regulations, that we get better racing. That's what we're all hoping for.
That's the goal. Yeah, that's the goal. Hopefully, better overtaking without. I mean, it felt. I think I like that this gives the driver more discretion. I think it'll get a little bit better overtaking maneuvers than just we got to wait for the DRS on the straight, and if we're close enough. In this case, it's like if you're out there at the detection line, you can maybe try something different if it's not working. This will also eliminate the DRS trains that we saw previously. So that's definitely a good thing. I think we all kind of we're not fans of those where it's just like everyone's within the second, so everyone has DRS, and there's only one place that you have that advantage on the straights. That's the place you can overtake. Now people can send it in the corner, maybe save their boost for the corner and try to send it through there, do all sorts of different things because you can have that advantage at any point in the lap, not just everyone having it the exact same.
Are we going to see Max Verstappen pulling Max Verstappen things?
I mean, he's going to send it in the corner, whether there's a gap or not, whether he has a boost or not. If you're in the way, you are in his way. He is entitled to the corner. It doesn't matter where you're sitting. That's his attitude. And served him well, but if you're in front of him, you are liable to get punted off the track if he thinks you're going too slow. So that I don't think is changing. The other thing, and I didn't put this in the show notes, but it's consistent with all the car, but the engine recovery on the battery is. You actually mentioned this earlier when we were talking about some of the liveries and we were talking about the Ferrari specifically, how they might have gotten the engine right. It's a 50-50 now on how the power is distributed. So they're having to charge their battery a lot more, which means what we've seen in testing, and we're going to good pivot to transition to testing. What we've seen in testing is a lot of lifting on the straights to get the battery, because the straights is as inefficient as you can get on the battery. When you're flat out, it's eating the battery. when you lift, when you brake, it charges. So there has been in the fastest laps on these testing have been with lifting on the straights, which I hate. As someone that loves like okay, she goes as fast as possible. If it's actually optimal to lift in a straight, that's I don't like that. What are your thoughts on this? I know Max is very upset.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be one of those things that you're going to see the FIA change really quickly. I think it's going to be something that they're either going to increase the power, that the engines are going to be able to make, or they're going to do something in there to allow them to increase, that percentage more to maybe probably a 65-35 split or a 70-30 split, of power to energy. I know this is what they really wanted to go for was this 50-50 split, but realistically, the technology just isn't there for, the batteries to last long enough for them to be using that much power, in this type of environment. You have to have the batteries have to be small enough to be able to work within a Grand Prix or a current Formula One car, but they also have to have enough capacity to be able to last long enough to do those, push laps or to do those, different, Grand Prix length, stints or whatever it may be. But if you're having to sacrifice speed and lap time for battery, consumption, then what's the difference between this and endurance racing? Endurance racing, you do that because you have to last a 24-hour race or a 12-hour race or whatever. This is supposed to be the fastest laps of all out of any group of cars, at all times, and they should be pushing at 100% at all times. So they need to figure something out. The FIA needs to make a decision on that. Maybe it's let the engines have more power so that you know, they're allocating more of that power towards charging the batteries while they're just normal or while they're going around the lap so that they charge quicker. I don't know what the exactly what the process would be or what the answer would be in that situation, but they're going to have to do something because this is not going to be as fun of a season as it could be with these new regulations if this is the biggest thing that we're going to be dealing with all year.
Yeah, I think the challenge with that is developing an engine is so expensive and time consuming. I don't know how you change the regulations. I mean, we're 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks from the first race. Like, there's not really time to radically do that. I think they have to eat it this year, and their changes that have to be for next year almost. It's hard to. You got teams that built their cars around these engines. Changing them now is very difficult.
Well, what I'm talking more about is stuff that's internal. So, for instance, we heard mum or rumors that the Ferraris and the Mercedes, I think it was, were two teams that had their engines pretty sorted out, and they seemed like they're doing pretty well with them. Um, we talked about it earlier that Ferrari seems to be doing pretty good with their engine, especially to the point that they're not allowing some rules for the starts to be changed because of the fact that they're doing so well. You know, they were talking that those cars had maybe a little bit higher compression ratio than some of the other cars, or they were able to get a higher compression ratio, so that's something internal, maybe a different head gasket or something small like that can increase, the way that increasing the compression ratio on those cars can increase so much more of the power that you can have, cars that are able to, perform a little bit better, just that much more better that they are able to compete with, or be able to compete with the problems that they're having with the battery. So that's kind of what I'm getting to there is that even a small change like compression ratio will allow those cars to run better with the limited battery power that they have or with the amount of battery power that they have to use.
Yeah, but I think it's biased in favor of teams that didn't do as well on the. It's a hard answer, right? I don't
Yeah.
think when they were designing the engine regs that they intended for teams to have to coast on the straights to recharge the battery. However, changing it now, there are teams that worked around that and did a better job and just did like, all right, everyone else can catch up because we don't want you coasting. So there's not a good answer.
Yeah,
We
it's
got to
definitely
figure
going
out
to
how
be
to make
tough.
the engines more efficient.
Definitely going to be tough.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. But speaking of, so we have seen some testing. So basically, every top team is saying the other teams are ahead of them. No one wants to admit they're in front. So we've seen Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes top the time sheets.
Yeah.
Red Bull saying that they're fourth and they're way behind the other three. McLaren saying they're behind Mercedes and Ferrari. Both Mercedes and Ferrari saying Red Bull's got the engine perfect. They're sandbagging. Of course, Red Bull's writing their own, developed in collaboration with Ford, but their own new engines now that aren't Honda based anymore. That Ford helped them develop them. Those are their engines. Or they're saying, oh, actually, like their engines are actually great. They don't even have to charge at all. What is your take on this nonsense?
It's all nonsense. That's all it is. It's all nonsense. Complete and utter nonsense. There's only one team that's talking about how good they are, and that's Alpine. Alpine's out there saying we're doing fantastic. We love our car. Our car is great. They're out there, they're talking their car up, and funny enough, that's a team that I'm calling out to be a dark horse this year. I think they're actually gonna be pretty good. But overall, it is. It's all BS. It's all, it's smoke and mirrors. We're not gonna know where these cars stack up until Australia on qualifying day, not even practice. I don't think that they're going to come out, in
No.
Australia and look good. It's going to be qualifying, Q1. They're going to come out and probably sandbag a little bit Q1, get through to Q2, Q3. That's when you're going to see the maximum performance of these cars, how they stack out right now before anything else. That is literally going to be when we see the maximum out of this first generation of this new series of cars is Q3 of Australia. Other than that, anytime before that is all BS.
Yeah, you're right. Even then, um, you know, see at the race paces, like it's really we're far away from that. It's just I think it's funny that they're all pretending like, well, we're dead over here, but man, look at that Ferrari. They're definitely. It's just I don't understand what purpose that serves.
It's so that nobody else looks at them. You got a lot of these.
True.
You see a lot of the Formula One pundits, like the guys, the Sam Collins and stuff like that. You watch a lot of his stuff online, and he's literally sitting there looking into the pits, and they're blocking everything. There's rules and regulations about how the team can block what these people are, or what the journalists are looking at in when the cars are in the pits, and they're literally trying to circumvent that by just putting their mechanics right in front of anybody who walks by, their cars with a camera. So these cars are so secretive, these teams are so you know tight-fisted when it comes to their cars, especially in the new regulations, especially when these cars are being developed and stuff like that. It's gonna be so interesting to see how these cars stack up when they actually are running violently, when they are actually going at it with each other. And that's it's what we want. We've been talking about this all the time. As much access as we love seeing, and as much access as we love knowing, or as much as we love knowing about these cars, it's going to be interesting to come out there that weekend, or to watch the race that weekend in Australia and see where they stack up, to see if Verstappen is going to come out with this car and dominate after he's been calling the car trash for 2 weeks. It's going to see if Kimi Antonelli can come out and wave his finger at all the old guys now that are racing it there, that he's racing against. It's gonna be interesting to see if Bottas and Checo come out there and light it up in his in his Cadillac and show everybody out, because they've had 2.5 years of building this car, knowing these regulations, and not having to worry about anything else, just worrying about building this car. That's a possibility. We could see that happen. all these things are all possibilities that we can see, moving into this season, and that's what makes it fun. That's what makes this regulation changes so interesting. I'm excited about it. I think testing so far has been great. This week of testing, it's going to be wall to wall coverage. So you know me, I'm going to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning watching this stuff.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see. So a couple other topics before we get out of here. So one is, so we've obviously seen the Cadillacs for the first time ever. Just what are your thoughts on what would a successful season look like for Cadillac?
I mean, I think success for them looks like, you know, maybe a couple top tens, maybe a couple top sevens, something like that, fighting in the midfield. Maybe finishing the year off in that 8 to 5 range. Ahead of some of the teams that we know are that have traditionally been backmarker teams. Like the Haas's, like the maybe Audi, stuff like that. I think finishing the year off somewhere in there will be a success. I think that anything above last place would be okay for them. I think last place they would come in and they would be super disappointed. Obviously, anybody would be disappointed for last place, but I think they're expecting to be fighting in the midfield.
Yeah, I think lower end of midfield is where I put it. Yeah, I think if they're off the pace, that'll be disappointing. But I mean, there are teams with years of data that they're going. I know it's a new design of the car, and they've had longer to work on it. They essentially had a cost cap free year to do whatever the hell they wanted last year. So they have had some advantages, but it would be hard. And Morgan Lazen would just beat the Alpine in points. I think there's another team. A good topic transition again. There is another team that might be bringing up the rear. Evan, you spent all of last year talking about Austin Martin's the next is the future. It's got Adrian Newey. What are we seeing here? They're 4 seconds off the pace.
They're
4.
not they're not showing their stuff. I'm telling you.
Do you think they're sandbagging by 4 seconds?
I think first of all, the Honda engine isn't there right now. I think it will be there by the time the season starts. I think that maybe they're just working through an issue, but I also think that they're sandbagging. I think that they're sandbagging more than anybody else. I think everybody is sandbagging, but I think that they're sandbagging more than anybody else. I really do. I don't see how an Adrian Newey penned car with a Honda engine that's been a proven, powertrain for the most part. I mean, obviously, I know that there's a new regulations, but essentially, it's the same 1.6 liter V6, turbocharged V6 engine. The IC hasn't been changed that much. It's only the electronics around it. You know, that car isn't that much slower than everybody else. I guarantee it. I see that car as being, again, right at that 5, 6, 7 mark where it's been the past couple of years, or where it essentially should be fighting with the Williams and I think this year it's going to be the Williams and the Haas are going to be that next tier down. So I think that those are going to be the where you know that car is going to be fighting this year, and possibly getting a podium here and there, depending on what happens with the top 4 teams.
So I can't agree with you. I mean, I don't think you sandbag that many seconds. Like, this car sucks.
Wait,
And
wait till this week. Let's see how they shake out the second week of testing.
we'll see. I mean, it's been the whole testing to this point. They've been pretty terrible.
Like I
I
said,
just don't see where you get that. I understand, like, there's always testing is always qualifiers. They're running programs. You don't know what the hell they're trying to do there.
yeah,
They're not trying. No one is trying to just be at the top of the timesheet. Like, in fact, well, maybe not with the way that they're 4 seconds off the pace, but like, no, anyone could seriously put on a qualifying lap and take the top timesheet for the weekend. But they're not trying to do that, right? But man, you mentioned the Honda engines. I'm concerned that they're not good. Like, this is a new engine generation. If they missed it, I mean, we saw this the entire of the last car cycle, that the Alpines with their Renault crappy engines were just off the pace. It got worse and worse as other teams got their aero better. But like they were just down on power. Like in the straights, they had nothing. You know, they even when they were competitive, sort of, but some of them just like don't have the juice. I'm worried about that. And also, the thing with the mad scientist car designer, and they go radical. If they get it wrong, it's gonna go really wrong.
Yeah, but it's Adrian Newey. Do you really expect that he's gonna get, and it's not even just
Eventually,
that he's
every
the
pitcher
designer.
loses a
He
fastball.
he's the guy that's in charge of the whole thing.
Eventually,
He no, he's the whole boss of Aston Martin right
I
now.
know, but that's clearly his design, though, too, right? Eventually, you miss. You don't hit every shot, man.
I don't know. I still expect them to be fighting in the midfield. You know, I can't see that car being that bad
I think
for
they're
a
going to be
long
near the
time.
bottom. I don't know if they'll be last. Yeah, I think they'll be down there with the Cadillacs, like that.
Okay.
Like I don't think they're going to be as bad as they're showing. Obviously, if they're bad as they're showing, they're not going to qualify for races because it's the 125% rule. They're not going to be that bad. But like, I don't know that they're gonna. I don't.
We put a
I
beer
would
on
be
that.
very. Huh?
We put a beer on that.
Yeah, we'll put a beer on that. What's the bet here?
We'll just go first race. I say that there will be a Aston Martin in the top 10 in the first race.
Aston Martin top 10 for sure. All right, I'll take that bet.
All right. Lock that in.
I'll lock it in. Beers on the loser. I like
Yeah,
that.
I'm
I
not.
like that. Let's see. You do have a shot because there could be reliability issues. Slow and steady can finish in the top 10 in the first race.
I guess we'll find out.
Anyway,
Isaac Hadjar could spin out completely before the race starts.
that's true. And then somehow end up in the Red Bull team anyway. And we'll also, worst case, it's not bad when the worst case you're looking as Alonso melting down on team radio. So
Yeah.
if it's as bad as it looks, GP2 engine could make a return.
Alonso's never had luck with a Honda engine.
I feel like Morgan's agreeing with me here, but anyway, so we'll see. Yeah. We'll see. Alonso tends to not take these things well, so if it's as slow as it looks, should make for some interesting team radio at least.
It should.
All right, man. Anything else you wanted to discuss here?
Well, just for Morgan's sake, I do want to mention that we did have the Daytona 500 yesterday. Tyler Reddick from my favorite team in NASCAR right now, 2311, the team owned by Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin. Tyler Reddick ended up with the win after a crazy end of the race where there was a wreck with 3 laps to go and then a wreck literally on the final lap, and Tyler Reddick ended up pulling out the win as they were wrecking behind him, literally crossing the line. But it was a fantastic race all or throughout. There was a lot of, I think that there was more lead changes in this Daytona 500 than there was in any previous 500 in the history of the Daytona 500. Also, this was the 25th anniversary of the year that Dale Earnhardt passed away, which was very special and emotional. You saw everybody go around on lap 3. All the fans had their hands up with the number 3 in the air for the whole lap. So that was a really special moment because obviously he meant a lot to a lot of drivers in NASCAR, a lot of NASCAR fans, and that was fantastic to see as well. And Morgan being such the big NASCAR fan that he is, I wanted to mention that. But also, we did have another big race at Daytona about a month ago in the 24 Hours of Daytona. Team Penske Porsche won that race. It was a fantastic race. Again, all of our people who watched the F1 movie saw that race that they had at the beginning with the main character was the 24 Hours of Daytona, and there was a fantastic race that happened this year. Again, like I said, Team Penske Porsche won that one. So, for all the racing fans out there who watch more than just Formula One, there has been some good racing so far this year. It seems like it's shaping out to be a pretty good year overall for racing in all forms. not just our favorite one where they constrict the rules to just a few things, but we all love it anyways. So check it all out. I'll be mentioning it throughout the year, but yeah, congratulations Tyler Reddick and Penske Porsche for those 2 wins so far.
Yep, good stuff. Good stuff. So yeah, like we said, the Formula One season is around the corner, and with so many races down with the starts, it's just like it's intense. So we're heating up to that season. So it'll be a good time to be back with us. I guess a couple of weeks we'll be previewing Australia, not Austria. Jeez. We can preview Austria too. It'll be a little early, but we can go ahead and go out there, do a little preview there as well.
For sure.
All right, Evan. Thanks for joining me. Everyone, thanks for watching and listening. And we'll be back soon to got one more test, and then that's showtime.
Sounds good to me.
All right, talk to y'all later.
Bye, guys.